Peace be with you. Gnostic Anthropology by Samael Aun Weor. Chapter 1. The materialistic anthropologists of this decadent and tenebrous age have been investigating the origin of the human being, yet indeed all that they have elaborated upon are hypotheses. If we ask the anthropologists of conventional anthropology exactly when and how the first human being appeared, they would indeed not know how to give us an exact answer. Since the times of Darwin and Haeckel and up to this present day and age, innumerable theories about the origin of the human being have appeared. However, we must emphatically clarify that none of these much boasted about theories can be demonstrated by themselves. Ernest Haeckel himself emphatically asseverated that within the field of conventional science neither geology nor that science named phylogeny will ever be exact. Therefore, if Haeckel himself made this type of assertion, what more can be added to this subject matter? Indeed, this matter about the origin of life and the human being certainly cannot be known as long as humanity does not study Gnostic anthropology in depth. What do the materialists that study protists say? What do they so arrogantly affirm? What do they suppose about the origin of life and of the human psyche? Let us remember with complete, absolute clarity Haeckel's famous atomic monera that was within an aqueous abyss, a complex atom that could not, in any way, emerge by chance, as this good gentleman supposed. Haeckel, an ignorant in depth, was worshipped by the British people. He induced great damage onto the world with his famous theories. As a parody to Job, all we can say about him is the following: may the memory of him perish from the earth, and may he have no name in the streets. Job 18 verse 17. Do you believe perhaps that such an atom from that aqueous abyss, the atomic monera, could emerge by chance? If the intelligence of scientists is necessary in order to construct an atomic bomb, then how much more talent would be required in order to construct an atom? Therefore, if we deny the intelligent principles of nature, then its mechanism would cease to exist, since the existence of nature's mechanism is not possible without machinists. If someone considers it possible for a machine to exist without its inventor, I would like him to demonstrate it. I would like him to place the chemical elements upon the table of the laboratory in order for a radio or an automobile or simply an organic cell to emerge by chance. At this time, we know that Don Alfonso Herrera, the author of plasmogeny, managed to build an artificial cell, yet this cell was always a dead cell, it never had life. What else do the materialists that study protists, microorganisms, say? They say that the consciousness, the being, the soul, the spirit, or simply the psychic principles, are nothing more than the molecular evolution of the protoplasm throughout the centuries. Obviously, the molecular souls of these fanatic materialists that study protists will never endure a deep analysis. Therefore, the soul cell, Haeckel's famous gelatinous bathybius from which all organic species emerged, is indeed just a good subject matter for Molière and his caricatures. What lies at the bottom of this whole subject matter and what is behind all of these mechanists' and evolutionists' theories is the impulse to combat the clergy. They are looking for a system that satisfies the mind and the heart in order to demolish the Hebraic Genesis. It is precisely a reaction against a misunderstanding of the biblical Adam and his famous Eve, who was made out of one of his ribs. Therefore, this reaction against a misinterpretation of the biblical Adam and Eve is the source for the ignorant theories of Darwin, Haeckel, and their other accomplices. So, it is not right to originate so many hypotheses that in themselves are deprived of any serious foundation, because of mechanical reactions against misapprehensions. What does Darwin state about the matter of the catarrhine monkey? That the human being possibly came from it? Nonetheless, he does not emphatically asseverate it, as the German and British materialists supposed. Indeed, Charles Robert Darwin placed within his system a certain basis that disagreed with and even absolutely annihilated the supposed human emergence from the monkey, whether it is the catarrhine or platyrrhine. First of all, as Thomas Henry Huxley already demonstrated, the human skeleton is completely distinct in its structure from the skeleton of the monkey. We do not doubt that there is a certain similitude between the anthropoid and the wretched intellectual animal mistakenly called human being. However, this resemblance is not definitive or defining on this matter. The anthropoid has a climbing skeleton. It is made for scaling. This is what the elasticity and construction of its skeletal system indicates. On the other hand, the human skeleton is in itself made for walking. Definitely, these are two totally different skeletal constructions. Moreover, the flexibility of the bones of the cranial axle of the anthropoid and of the human being is completely different. This invites us to seriously ponder. On the other hand, the following has been stated by the materialistic anthropologists with complete, absolute clarity. An organized being cannot in any way be the outcome of another being who marches in the opposite way, who is antithetically ordered. We must give a certain example in reference to this matter. Let us observe the human being and the anthropoid. Even though the human being in this day and age is certainly degenerated, he still is an organized being. Now let us study the life and behavior of the anthropoid. We can observe that it is organized in a different way, contrary, antithetical. Therefore, an organized being cannot be the outcome of another who is organized in the opposite manner. This former assertion is always severely uttered by the materialistic schools. Which age could be associated with the anthropoid? In which epoch did the first simians appear upon the face of the earth? Unquestionably, who can deny that it was during the Miocene epoch? Obviously, it had to have appeared during the late Miocene epoch, 15 to 25 million years ago. Why did the anthropoids have to appear upon the face of the earth? Can the people associated with materialistic anthropology, those brilliant modern scientists who boast about being so wise, give us an exact answer? They obviously cannot. Moreover, the Miocene epoch was not in any way located upon the famous Pangaea which is touted so much by the materialistic geologists. It is obvious that the Miocene epoch had its proper scenario on the ancient Lemurian land, the continent that was formerly located in the Pacific Ocean. Remnants of Lemuria are still located in Oceania, in the Great Australia, and on Easter Island, where some carved monoliths were found, etc. So, if the materialistic doctrine cannot accept this due to the fact of their narrow-mindedness that is bottled up within the idea of Pangaea, what does it matter to people, or to science, or to us? Indeed, they are not going to detect Lemuria with carbon-14 tests, or with potassium-argon, or with pollen. All of these test systems of a materialistic type are just good materials for Molière and his comedies. In this day and age, after the infinite suppositions made by Haeckel, Darwin, Huxley, and all of their secularists, they continue enthroning the theory of natural selection of the species, granting it nothing less than the power to create new species. In the name of the truth, we must state that natural selection as a creative power is simply a rhetorical game for ignorant people, something that has no basis. The assertion that states that new species are being created through natural selection, that the human being had emerged through natural selection, is in the depth frightfully ludicrous and shows ignorance taken to extremes. We do not deny natural selection. It is obvious that it exists, yet it does not have the power of creating new species. The truth is that physiological selection, selection of structures, and the segregation of the most APT does exist, that is all. To take natural selection up to the degree of converting it into a universal creative power is the breaking point of absurdities. A true sage would not have so stubbornly conceived of such a notion. Never have we observed or witnessed a new species emerge through natural selection. If so, when? In which epoch? Structures are selected, yes, we do not deny it. The strongest ones triumph in the struggle for daily bread, in the incessant battle of every moment, when one fights in order to eat and not be eaten. Obviously, the strongest one triumphs, and he transmits onto his descendants his characteristics, his physiological particularities, his structural particularities. Thus the selected ones, the most capable, are segregated and transmit their aptitudes on to their descendants. This is how the law of natural selection must be understood. This is how it must be comprehended. Any given species within the profound jungles of nature has to fight in order to devour and not be devoured. Logically, such a struggle is frightful. As an outcome, as is proper and natural, the most powerful ones triumph. There are marvelous structures within the strongest, and their important characteristics are transmitted onto their descendants. Yet, this does not signify a change of figure. This does not signify the birth of a new species. So, never has a materialistic scientist observed one species emerging from another through the law of natural selection. This has not been proven. This has never been palpated in any way. Then what do these materialistic scientists base themselves upon? It is easy to throw a hypothesis out there and then emphatically asseverate that it is the truth and nothing but the truth. Nevertheless, aren't the scientists from materialistic anthropology the ones who state that they believe in only what they can see? The ones who do not accept anything that they have not examined? So, they contradict themselves horribly, because they believe in their assumptions that which they have never seen or touched. They affirm that the human being comes from the mouse, yet this is not proven. They have never perceived this directly. They also emphasize the idea that the human being comes from the baboon or the mandrill, Quadrumana cynocephaly, from Western Africa. The sophisms of these foolish scientists are innumerable, absurd assertions of facts that they have never seen. We, the Gnostics, do not accept their superstitions because their absurd assertions are fetishism. We, the Gnostics, are mathematicians when investigating and precise in our expressions. We do not like such fantasies. We want facts, concrete and definite facts. Thus, when investigating this theme related with our possible ancestors, we can clearly verify the chaotic state in which the materialistic doctrine is found. The disorder of these scientists' degenerated minds and their lack of capacity for investigating is evident. This is the crude reality of the facts. The subject matter that states that certain hominoid forms emerge from other ones, just like that, based only upon ridiculous tests, such as carbon-14, potassium or pollen, palpably constitutes the shame of this century. We, the Gnostic anthropologists, have different systems for investigation. We possess special disciplines which allow us to put into activity certain latent faculties of the human brain, certain senses of perception completely unknown to materialistic anthropology. It is logical that nature has a memory. One day this will be demonstrated. Scientific research has already started. Soon the sounding waves will be rearranged into images which will be perceptible on certain screens. Certain technical experiments about this matter already exist. Then the televiewers of the whole world will see the origin of the human being, the history of the earth and of its root races. When that day arrives, a day that is not so distant, the Antichrist of false science will be naked before the solemn verdict of public consciousness. Indeed, the problems of natural selection, the climate, the environment, etc., fascinate many people, and this is why they forget the original source from which each species emerged. The stubborn scientists believe that natural selection can be processed in an absolutely mechanical way without intelligent directrix principles. This is as absurd as to think that any machine in the world can be processed without an intelligent principle, without an architectural mind, or without an engineer to give form to it. Undoubtedly, these intelligent principles from nature can only be rejected by the stubborn ones, for those who pretend that it is possible for any organic machine to emerge by chance. These principles could never be rejected by those truly wise humans in the most complete sense of the word. As time passes by and as we delve into all of this, we can see and further find all of the mistakes in materialistic anthropology. Therefore, it is necessary to profoundly reflect on all of these things. If instead of assuming a position of attack against the clergy, those materialistic anthropologists would first of all reflectively analyze in depth, then they would not dare to disseminate their anti-scientific hypotheses. We know that Adam and Eve, who bothered the scientists from materialistic anthropology very much, are nothing more than a symbol. So, the profane scientists from materialistic anthropology want to refute the biblical Genesis. It is good for them as well as for all of us to understand that the book of Genesis is just a treatise of alchemy for alchemists. Genesis must be studied as an alchemical book, and not in a simple, literal way. So, the scientists from materialistic anthropology exert themselves in order to refute something that they not even remotely know. This is why I honestly dare to state that their hypotheses do not have solid foundations. Darwin himself never thought to go so far with his doctrine. Let us remember that he himself speaks about the characterizations. Unquestionably, after some organic species have passed through a selective process of physiological structures, these species characterize themselves in a constant and definitive way. Then, we see that the famous anthropoid had to pass through selective processes and subsequently assumed all of its present characteristics, but it did not pass through any change again. This is obvious. That subject matter about Pithecanthropus Noah with his three famous sons, namely, the cyanocephalus with a tail, the monkey without a tail, and the Paleolithical arboreal man, indeed never had exact corroboration. These are just theories without any basis, and indeed they are frightfully ludicrous. Those who, when inquiring about the origin of the human being, incline themselves towards the prosimian mammals, for example, the famous lemur, show that they do not even remotely suspect what the human being himself is, let alone his origin. In this day and age, the celebrated lemur is considered by some scientists as one of our conspicuous ancestors because of his assumed discoid placenta. 1. This has nothing to do with human genesis. This, in depth, is nothing but fantasies that are deprived of any reality. Many renowned materialistic scientists are active in order to study the mechanical evolution of the human species or of any other species. They ignore that the original microorganisms from this great nature, human beings or beasts, always develop themselves within psychological space and the superior dimensions before crystallizing themselves in a physical form. Halfway through their development, these microorganisms crystallize into a sensible form. They had previously passed through tremendous evolving and devolving processes within psychological space, within the hypersensible, within the superior dimensions of nature and the cosmos. Of course, when we speak like this, conventional anthropologists feel very nervous and upset. They feel like the native Chinese people do when listening to an Occidental musical concerto. Perhaps they laugh, ignoring that the one who laughs at what he does not know is an ignoramus who walks on the path of idiocy. Goethe. Materialistic scientists search for similarities. Yes, they believe that the shape of the shark's head and the mouth gives origin to other mammals, among them our brother the mouse, that for the materialistic scientists in this day and age has passed into the category of great lord. Supposedly, the mouse is nothing more than the ancestor of those such as Haeckel, Darwin, and possibly of Huxley and Einstein, even of those famous pharaohs of ancient Egypt, and who knows what else. So, in this day and age, the mouse is considered a prosimian mammal. The mouse has become a prominent subject matter in the conference halls. Alas, behold how far the ignorance of the human being has gone. We do not deny that the mouse existed in Atlantis and that indeed it was the size of a pig. Don Mario Rosso de Luna, the eminent Spanish writer, clearly talks about this. The small Larousse dictionary illustrates it, and states that in ancient times the mouse was denominated with the word alto, tall. Yes, the mouse existed in Atlantis, and we cannot deny its presence in Lemuria either. Yet, to assert that the mouse is one of the most important ancestors of the human being is totally false. Indeed, when one does not know Gnostic anthropology, one then falls into the most frightful absurdities. Now, in this present space age, the accomplices of the Antichrist, materialistic science, bow before the mouse and the shark, which is also considered an ancient ancestor, and also before the lemur, which indeed is a very fascinating animal. So, when Gnostic anthropology is known in depth, one cannot fall into ludicrous statements. This is logical. When the principles of materialistic anthropologists are carefully analyzed, we discover that their fantasies are due to their absolute ignorance of universal Gnosticism. It is very empirical to establish a basis for a possible descendant of the human being based upon the fact that the feature of one face is similar to that of another. This is too shallow. So too are those who suppose that the human being was made out of clay. They are not aware that this is merely a symbol. So, as we have already stated, before the original microorganisms of this great nature crystallized into a physical form such as into human beings or beasts, they always first developed themselves within psychological space and the superior dimensions. There is no doubt that these microorganisms are similar in their construction, therefore they could not serve as basis, as a foundation in order to establish a theory or simply in order to elaborate a basic concept. These microorganisms are differentiated from one another by the pace at which they crystallize. This is normal indeed. So, the origin of the human being is something more profound. He developed himself within the chaos, in the superior dimensions of nature, until in ancient times he was crystallized into a tangible form. Unquestionably, in future chapters we will advance more and more throughout all of this exegesis. I want to state to you that the origin of humanity will be uncovered in these lectures, namely the primary and secondary causes that originated the human species, and other themes of transcendental repercussion. Do the materialistic anthropologists know perhaps the answer to the former questions? The scientists themselves, who are followers of Haeckel, know very well that the whole geological past and materialistic phylogeny will never be exact sciences. This is what they have affirmed themselves, this is how they have stated it. If this is what they say, then what? We are in moments of great inquietudes. The mystery of the origin of the human being must be clarified. The field of conjectures is detestable. It is like a wall without a foundation. All you need to do is to push it a little bit in order for it to become a pile of rubble. The most critical aspect of materialistic anthropology is the denial of the intelligent principles of universal machinery. Obviously, such an attitude leaves the machinery without a foundation. It is not possible for the machinery to work or to be built by chance. The intelligent principles of nature are active in the whole selective process and they manifest themselves wisely. Likewise, it is an absurdity to bottle up ourselves within the dogma of mechanical evolution. If the constructive principles exist in nature, unquestionably, so too do the destructive principles. If there is evolution in every living species, likewise so too is devolution. For instance, there is evolution in the seed that dies in order for the stalk to sprout. There is evolution in the plant that grows, that gives flowers, leaves, and that finally gives fruits. Yet, there is devolution in the plant that withers, that agonizes, and that finally becomes a bunch of wood. There is evolution in the creature that is gestated in the maternal womb, in the child who plays, and in the teenager. Yet, there is devolution in the elder who dwindles away and finally dies. When the worlds emerge from the chaos of life, they start to evolve to a certain point. Afterwards, they devolve and finally they become new moons. If when we study anthropology we give exclusivity to mechanical evolution, then we are studying it in a partial way and thus fall into error. However, if we study anthropology in the light of the law of devolution, then we advance equilibrated, because evolution and devolution constitute the two laws of the mechanical axis of the whole of nature. It is a total absurdity to say that evolution is the sole foundation for this entire, great natural mechanism. We must consider life and death, the times of development and the times of decrement. Only in this way will we correctly march within the integral structure of the Gnostic dialectic. We are not willing, in any way, to remain bottled up within the materialistic dogma of evolution. We must by necessity study the devolving processes of anthropology, otherwise we will walk on the path of error. What are the original prototypes of this human race? Who knows them? By means of scientific methods we can see, hear, and touch the original prototypes of this human race. We know very well that human beings existed before the intellectual animal appeared in the Atlantis of Plato. Atlantis is not a simple fantasy, as the ignorant fanatics of the famous materialistic Pangaea suppose. The human being existed in Lemuria, as well as in the Hyperborean and Polar epochs. However, these are themes that we will develop in the following chapters in order for us to clarify these anthropological themes better. Atlantis really existed. The archipelago of Antilles, the Canary Islands and even Spain itself are remnants of Atlantis. Spain is a piece of ancient Atlantis. This is unknown to those who are passionately fond of materialistic anthropology and also to the geologists who are so deeply behind the times, who are incapable of projecting themselves through time. How can they know something about the events that occurred many millions of years ago in the Miocene epoch? What do they know about it? Have they seen it? Have they touched it? If we Gnostics talk about the Miocene epoch, it is because we can see it. The Miocene epoch is accessible to the one who is capable of developing the faculties that are latent in the human brain. Nonetheless, the materialist attitude of denial is incongruent. They say that they only believe in what they see, nothing else, yet they believe in all of their absurd fantasies. No one has seen and no one has proven their suppositions. We can state with certainty that not even one scientist has ever witnessed how the first human being came forth. Yet, they talk with so much self-sufficiency it is as if they were present in the Miocene epoch, as if they had seen the anthropoids appearing there in ancient Lemuria. The materialistic anthropologists enthrone their marvelous gods, namely the lemurs and mandrills, baboons. They place them as sublime prosimians from which they assert we descended. Has this been confirmed by them? Have they, at some time, seen it? Never. So, where is their foundation? Is their foundation resting upon fantasies that they have never seen? Are they not the same people who state they only believe in what they see? Then, why do they believe in what they have never observed? Is it not perhaps a contradiction? Are they not perhaps contradictory within their depth? Chapter 2. The theme of the origin of the human being is indeed very debatable and very thorny. Charles Robert Darwin left certain principles in his work that must be remembered by the materialistic anthropologists. Darwin states that a species that evolves positively cannot in any way descend from another that evolves negatively. Darwin also affirms that two similar species, even though different, can refer to a common ancestor, but one can never come from the other. Thus, as we advance through these disquisitions of scientific anthropology, we obviously find certain contradictions within materialism. How is it possible that Darwin's former principles are ignored? How is it possible in this day and age that there are still people who think that the human being comes from the ape? Unquestionably, the facts speak for themselves, and until now the famous missing link has not been found. Where is it? Much has been stated against the existence of the Father Manu, the Dayan Chohan, yet indeed there are millions of people in the Eastern and Western world who accept it. Moreover, such a belief is more logical than Haeckel's monkey man, who indeed is nothing more than one of his fantasies. Time is passing by, and the famous simian man has not yet been discovered anywhere on Earth. Where in the world is the ape that is capable of reasoning, thinking, and that has a language? Where is it? Hence, in depth these types of materialistic bookish fantasies are absolutely good for nothing. Observe for instance the size of the brains. The cephalic mass of a gorilla is not even a third of the brain of any savage person from our terrestrial globe. A link that would connect the most evolved gorilla with the most uncivilized savage person from Australia is missing. Where is that link? What happened with it? Does it exist? Undoubtedly, the first simians appeared on the Lemurian continent during the Mesozoic epoch, but where was their origin? Gnostic anthropology emphatically affirms that certain degenerated groups of humans in Lemuria sexually mixed themselves with beasts in order to originate the simian species. Haeckel never in any way was opposed to the concept that apes had their birth in Australia, in Lemuria. He always accepted the reality of the Lemurian continent. Yet, let us reflect a little. Where was Lemuria located? In the Pacific Ocean, this is obvious. It covered an extensive zone of that sea. Through 10,000 years of earthquakes, Lemuria was submerged little by little in the boisterous waves of that ocean. Yet, remnants of Lemuria were left, namely Oceania, Australia, Easter Island, etc. Lemuria was real. It had its place in a very ancient time. This assertion can upset the materialistic anthropologist partisans of Pangaea. These ladies and gentlemen have their minds bottled up within that dogma related to Pangaea. They do not even remotely accept the possibility of Lemuria. There is absolutely nothing strange about the fact that the simians were born during the Mesozoic era and evolved to the Miocene epoch, yet others from the Eocene epoch, during the Tertiary period. However, our assertions do not end here. Other species of apes had their origin in the Atlantis of Plato, a continent that is nothing more than a myth to the materialistic fanatic partisans of Pangaea. Nonetheless, even if they deny it, Atlantis existed. Even if they are opposed to it, Atlantis has already been discovered. Anyone who has studied the marine floor knows very well that between America and Europe there is a great marine platform. It was precisely a few years ago when several scientists, those who had discovered Atlantis, proposed to explore the remains of Atlantis from the coasts of Spain. However, Spain was ruled by Franco's regime, therefore they were not allowed to perform their investigations. Therefore, Atlantis is not what it is believed to be, that is to say, it is not a fantastic legend, but rather a tremendous reality. In other times, the map of the world was completely different. Everything is changing. Even the supporters of Alfred Wegener's Pangaea have suffered great changes. We know very well that the floating continents experience some displacements. Mario Rosso de Luna had already clearly explained this, and therefore it should not surprise anybody. The materialistic fanatics of Pangaea agree with this, they do not deny it. However, they lack a lot of necessary information in order to know the causes of the displacements of these continental flotations. I think that if they would study Mario Rosso de Luna, they would better complete their information. If we compare our Earth to a cracked open egg, then the yolk would be the continents floating over the egg white. There may be many substances, liquids, and elements between the continent-like yolk and the egg white, yet in this day and age materialistic science does not know anything about them. There are some who believe that certain types of superior apes come from Lemuria, for example. The gorilla, a genus of anthropomorphic ape that comes from equatorial Africa, and has a stature of about 2 meters and a maximum weight of 250 kilograms. The orangutan that comes from the Malayan language and means, a man from the trees, is also known as the great anthropomorphic ape from Sumatra and Borneo. It measures about 1.20 to 1.50 meters in stature. They are arboreal and easy to domesticate. The chimpanzee is an anthropomorphic ape from Africa. There are others who clearly affirm that the inferior types of apes, like the catarrhine or platyrrhine, etc., properly came from Atlantis. We cannot make objections about this, but indeed we must profoundly reflect upon it. In this day and age materialistic science is making certain very silly statements. Every day they invent new hypotheses. So, a chain has been established that is very curious and ludicrous in content, a chain that is related with our possible ancestors. The shark appears to be the king of that chain, from which, according to those anthropologists, descended the alligators. Such a theory is ludicrous in itself, indeed it is only conceivable by alligator-like minds. They continue stating that the famous opossum comes after the alligator. They state that the opossum is a creature similar to a crocodile, but a little more evolved. This is what they emphasize. And on they go, following the course of that great chain of marvels to a certain little animal. In this day and age, they have given a lot of importance to that little animal. I am emphatically referring to the lemur. They grant unto the lemur a discoid placenta, a matter that is rejected by zoologists. We find gigantic contradictions within these gorges of false science. They proceed by stating that from the lemur, which could have existed some 150 million years ago, descended the monkey, and finally the gorilla appears at the end of this chain. In this fantastic chain, the gorilla is our immediate ancestor, the forefather of the human being. As I have already stated in the first chapter, some anthropologists do not set aside the wretched mouse while talking about these themes. They even want to include it in their fancy chain. In which link of this ludicrous chain do they place the mouse? Between which animals should Mr. Mouse be? Who knows? Let them suffer with their theories. Based on the fact that the mouse is small, they affirm with a tone of extraordinary sapience that the human being was also so minute, so microscopic, that is to say, so tiny, that in this day and age we would be overwhelmed if we were to see such a human being. On what do they base their theories in order to asseverate such nonsense? So, should we accept that according to them human beings are children of the mouse? I do not know in which link of that chain they include the mouse, perhaps before or after the lemur. They sustain that we grew until we reached the present human height of this great civilization. and until we reach the extraordinary perfection that this civilization possesses now. So in this day and age, the mouse is the priority in public anthropological conferences of this great civilization. Thus, if things continue in this way, then within a short time the governments should prohibit the killing of mice, since according to the materialistic anthropologists the mice are our forefathers. Where are all the links of that chain? How is it possible that a shark turns into an alligator, from one night to the next, or throughout many centuries, just like that? Many millions of years have passed and the sharks continue to be sharks. Never has it been seen that from one species of sharks, whether from the Atlantic or Pacific Oceans, new alligators were born. To begin with, the crocodiles, alligators, or caimans, at least the ones we know, are not found in the seas, but rather in rivers and lakes, except the crocodile-like anthropologists who are very civilized and who are going around the world inventing silly theories. Do you know of a species of alligators that has emerged from within the boisterous waves of the ocean? The world knows very well that the habitat for all types of alligators is the sweet waters. We have seen alligators in great rivers, and this is easily proven. We have visited the oceans, and we have never seen or heard of any fisherman that has caught an alligator within his net in the middle of the ocean. They might catch sharks, but alligators? When? We are asserting things based on clear, concrete, and definitive facts. Where might the links be that bond the alligator to the opossum? Where might the links be that bond the opossum to that small animal, the lemur, an animal which is deprived of a placenta and because of this Haeckel labeled it a creature with a discoid placenta? Continuing, where are the links that bond the lemur with the monkey? Where are the links that bond the monkey with the gorilla? And where are the links of the gorilla to the human being? Where are they? We have seen precise elements and we observe that the points of connection are missing. To state things just like that is abundantly absurd. Much has been said about the Monera, an atom of the aqueous abyss, the first drop of salt within a Silurian ocean which was filled with mud at its bottom and where the first bed of rocks was not yet deposited. However, what is the origin of the Monera? Could we perhaps conceive that something so extraordinary as the first atomic point of protoplasm, which is so properly organized and with such a complex construction, can be the outcome of fortuity, the outcome of chance? We understand that when we deny the intelligent principles of nature, then the whole organization of protoplasm doesn't make any sense. Time is passing by and materialistic anthropology is going to be destroyed little by little. The materialistic anthropologists still cannot say when and how the first human being appeared. They state nothing more than ludicrous hypotheses, conjectures that lack serious foundations. Materialistic anthropology points to Australia a lot. The position of conventional anthropology is highly supported when they state that the tribes that live in Australia descended from apes. Scientifically, the former statement falls to the floor when we measure the size of the brains and confront the facts. We see that the size of the brain of a highly developed gorilla does not even reach half of the mass of the brain of an uncivilized native of Australia. Therefore, a point of union between the two is missing. So, where is that link? Let them show it to us, for we are all here to see it. In my first lecture, the first chapter, I said that the ladies and gentlemen of materialistic anthropology affirm in an extremely grandiloquent way that they only believe in what they can see, yet the facts are showing us their falsity. They firmly believe in absurd hypotheses which they have never witnessed. The fact of attributing or stating that human beings come from sharks, to establish a whimsical chain just based on morphologic resemblance, shows us in the depth a superficiality taken to extremes. If what they write about is nonsense, they are indeed abusing the reader's intelligence a lot. If what they talk and teach about is nonsense, then they are indeed terribly comic and even ludicrous. Human beings were sexually mixed with beasts in Lemuria, and this is something we have no doubt about at all. Apes were not the only outcome of this mixture, so were various monstrous forms that even in this day and age have documentation in the eastern part of the world as well as in the western part. We will cite as an example certain estranged Lemurian simians that could serve as a mockery for the superficial materialists of this epoch. Yet, one has to affirm the truth with valor. These Lemurian simians were a certain species that existed. They were soon walking using their hands and feet as any simian would. Before long they were standing on their 2 feet. They had blue and also red faces. These simians were the outcome of certain human beings who crossed themselves with subhuman beasts of the Miocene epoch, especially from the Mesozoic era. We find everything that we formerly stated within reference materials such as on papyrus, codices, bricks, ancient monuments, and archaic manuscripts. Thus, there were multiple simian forms that emerged on the ancient continent of Mu. Nevertheless, how did the human being first appear? In which way did it occur? Until now, all of these interrogatives have been a puzzle, a true enigma for the materialistic partisans of Darwin, Haeckel, and even for modern anthropologists. Where can we find the origin of the human being? Unquestionably, we can find it within the human being himself. Where else could it be? Let us now focus our attention on Australia. What do materialistic anthropologists asseverate? They affirm that the Australian Aboriginal tribes have the anthropoids as their ascendants. Of course, they cannot prove this, yet they affirm it, they believe in this. See for yourselves how paradoxical these ladies and gentlemen truly are. The Australian clans are the most primitive that presently exist in the world. What could the origin of such families be? We must first begin with the origin of Australia. Australia is a fragment of Lemuria, which was located in the Pacific Ocean. It is an old land. Where are the ancestors of those tribes? Let us talk about their physical bodies. We will obviously find such osseous remnants at the very bottom of the Pacific Ocean. There we can find skeletons of beasts, since the Australian clans that presently exist are a mixture of certain animal humanoids that passed through many transformations. Such families should be observed, thus we can understand that they are the outcome of the sexual crossing of the inhabitants of ancient Lemuria with the beasts of nature. The bodies of some of the native people from many parts of Australia are so abundantly hairy that it seems that they have the skin of beasts. The former statement is the apparent foundation for those materialistic ladies and gentlemen to asseverate, "Lo and behold, these are children of anthropoids, our theory is proven." Those materialistic anthropologists are extremely superficial, they do not have any maturity in their understanding. Regrettably, their minds are degenerated, in a state of decrepitude. If we want to search for the origin of the human being, we must know ontogeny in depth. It is not possible to know phylogeny if we exclude ontogeny. Observe the recapitulative processes of the human being inside the maternal womb. Nature always makes recapitulations. Observe a seed, the germ of a tree, inside it is a potential tree. All it needs is to be developed. So, in order for it to develop, it needs soil, water, air, and sunlight. All of the processes passed on by the tree that served as a parent are recapitulated by nature within the seed that must be developed. Using other terms, we will state that all the processes through which the whole family of that tree endured over time are recapitulated by nature within the seed that must be developed. The whole species of that tree developed slowly and grew at the same pace of the other trees. Likewise, so did the tree from which that seed was detached. In itself, that seed repeats that process of recapitulation, leaf by leaf, until the tree finally bears its fruits and seeds, so that the other trees that will eventually be born from them will make the same recapitulations. Let us observe how nature recapitulates all of her marvels within the cosmos. Each year spring, summer, fall, and winter return. These are perfect recapitulations. Thus, within the maternal womb is a correct recapitulation of the whole human species. All the steps the human being passed through since its most remote origins are repeated inside the maternal womb. First of all, no one can deny that inside the maternal womb the fetus passes through the 4 kingdoms of nature. First it is a stone, second a plant, third an animal, and fourth a human being. As a human embryo or corpuscle, it is inorganic. It is the ovum that detaches itself from the ovary and goes to join the organic matter. Thus, circulation carries the ovum to the very bottom of the matter for its own development. In its second aspect, we see how the human embryo assumes a vegetal state. The human fetus looks like a carrot, rounded at its base and pointed in its superior part. When this is clinically studied, it seems much more like an onion with distinct layers. Between the layers there is a marvelous liquid. The possibility of the fetus depends upon the umbilical cord of this apparent onion, just like the fruit of any plant. Behold here the vegetal state. Later on the animal form appears, then the fetus takes the form of a tadpole, and this is already completely proven. Finally, it will assume the human form. So, the 4 phases, 1 mineral, 1 vegetal, 1 animal, and the last one human, get their recapitulation. After knowing and analyzing all of the former phases, we conclude by stating the following: no physician has ever seen the form of the anthropoid in any of the 4 phases of the fetus. During the process of fetal recapitulation, which scientist has ever observed the fetus taking the form of a catarrhine or platyrrhine monkey or the shape of an orangutan or a gorilla? Therefore, what materialistic science affirms is absurd. Therefore, the origin of the human being has to be found within the very womb of the woman. The origin of the human being is hidden within the processes of recapitulation. These are the stages through which human beings have passed. So within a human mother's womb, in which process of recapitulation can we see the appearance of the shape of a shark or that of a lemur? Where does all that Haeckel mentioned so passionately appear? At which stage of the pregnancy does it appear? Why do these materialistic ladies and gentlemen want to stray from what is correct? Why don't they search for the origin of the human being within the human being itself? Why are they searching for the human being's origin outside of it? All the laws of nature are inside of us, and if we do not find them within, we will never find them without. We have then arrived to a very delicate and extremely difficult point. To state that we were a stone, a plant, an animal, and finally a human has all been very well settled. But when and how did it happen? Which primary or secondary causes are governed by all of those processes? These are enigmas. If the ladies and gentlemen of materialistic anthropology were not so mesmerized by the dogma of Euclid's 3-dimensional geometry, then these processes could be easily clarified and everything would be different. Unfortunately, on their own whim they want all of us to accept what they state as a dogma of faith. They want to have all of us bottled up within that foundation. This is absurd as to want to bottle universal life, or as absurd as to want to pour an ocean into a glass. The 4th coordinate, the 4th vertical, exists, this is undeniable, yet this statement upsets the materialists. Nonetheless, Einstein, who cooperated with the manufacturing of the atomic bomb, accepted the 4th dimension. Nobody can deny the 4th dimension in mathematics. Yet, the materialistic people of this day and age cannot accept the 4th dimension, not even when it has been mathematically proven that other superior dimensions exist within nature. They want to be forcefully enclosed within Euclid's tridimensional world. This is why physics is totally stagnant in its advancement due to their absurd disposition. This is the time in which there should be cosmic ships capable of traveling throughout the infinite, yet that longing is not possible while physics continues to be bottled up in Euclid's 3-dimensional dogma. These ladies and gentlemen have not been capable of answering the question of how and when, on which date, the origin of the human being occurred. So, if they would accept the possibility of the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th dimensions, then everything would be different. Yet, we are sure that they will never accept this. Why? It is because their minds are in the process of complete degeneration, due to abuse of sex. Therefore, under these conditions it is not possible for them to comprehend the thesis that we are stating here. If they want to understand it, they need to begin to regenerate their brain. Thus, this will be the way for them to accept our Gnostic postulations. Stone, plant, animal, and human being, behold here the foundation for serious anthropology. Now, let us think about the former state of the human, about our legitimate ancestors. Unquestionably, we will find them in animal life in nature, but located in the 4th dimension. This statement is distressing for the materialists. Nonetheless, they are the same materialists who were laughing at Louis Pasteur and his theories, who mocked him when he was disinfecting surgical utensils. They never believed in microorganisms because they were not able to see them, yet now they accept them. Can there be animal life within the fourth coordinate? Yes, of course there is. Could there be a system of corroboration? Obviously yes, yet the methods are very different from those of false science, which is found in a retarded state. Who has those processes and systems? We have them and will we gladly teach them to everyone who truly wants to investigate the field of pure science. Did animal life exist within the fourth coordinate? Yes, it logically did. Did plant life exist in the fifth coordinate? Yes, naturally it did. Did mineral life exist in the sixth coordinate? Yes, it did. Yet, I clarify that the mineral life of the sixth coordinate, the plant life of the fifth, and the animal life of the fourth were not in any way similar to the animal, plant, and mineral life of this merely physical world. The animal, plant, and mineral life of the fourth, fifth, and sixth coordinates condensed here in this tridimensional terrestrial globe, we do not deny it, yet this happened over the course of millions of years. How can we in any way define the evolving processes if we eliminate from nature that subject matter stated by Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz? We are referring to the monads or jivas, intelligent principles of nature. Certainly, a whole abyss interposes between the atomic monera of Haeckel and the Zarastripa of Manu, the jiva of the Hindustani or the monad of Leibniz. This is because the atomic monera of Haeckel is very far from the true monad or principle of life. It is true, no lie, for certain, that the virginal sparks or, simply put, Leibniz's monads, evolved within the mineral kingdom during the epoch of great activity of the sixth dimension. These monads evolved likewise within the vegetal kingdom in the fifth dimension, and finally they advanced to the animal state in the fourth dimension. This is unquestionable. These dimensions from nature will be seen in the future through the use of some devices of high optical pressure. Yet, until that day arrives, we can be sure that we, the Gnostic anthropologists, must tolerate the same mockery Pasteur endured when he was talking about microbes. However, the moment will arrive in which those dimensions will be perceptible by means of televisions, then the satires will end. Meanwhile, as we speak, experiments are being performed in order to try to transform sound waves into images. When this occurs, all of the evolving and devolving processes of nature will be seen. Then the Antichrist of false science will be exposed to the solemn verdict of public consciousness. In regards to the human organism, we see that in the beginning it is invisible, that is, when the process of gestation begins, when the primeval cell begins to germinate, the ovum and sperm cannot be seen with a simple glance. Who would suppose that a creature could emerge from one spermatozoon and one fertilized cell? Can this be seen by a simple glance? Thanks to the microscope we know that it is so. This is obvious. Thus, by establishing facts we can state that the monads who passed through the mineral kingdom in the sixth dimension are the same ones who passed through the plant kingdom in the fifth dimension, and through the animal kingdom in the fourth dimension. It was precisely at the end of the fourth dimension when a certain creature similar to an anthropoid, from the Greek anthropoids, with a human shape, appeared. Nonetheless, this creature was not a gorilla, a chimpanzee, or anything of the sort. When the epoch of activity for this three-dimensional world started, that creature, as well as the planet Earth, suffered some changes and various metamorphoses. Finally, the human figure crystallized. We have to take into account that with the passing of the centuries the morphology of all human creatures, as well as of nature, is changing. Unquestionably, human morphology emerged in accordance with the protoplasmic age of our Earth in order to really come into existence. Then, afterwards it passed through the Hyperborean, Lemurian, and Atlantean periods, alternating itself a little until reaching our present day. The creatures, the human beings, the ancient human races that preceded us, were giants who slowly over time lessened in stature until becoming what we presently are. This is all stated by traditions of ancient Mexico and by other countries on Earth. We will continue by explaining about the four steps, mineral, plant, animal, and human, exclusively within the tridimensional zone of Euclid on this physical planet Earth. So, materialistic anthropology failed to give us the how, when, and why the first human being appeared. After having delved very deeply into these matters, I know for sure, I am absolutely positive that for the materialistic anthropologists all of these statements will become new enigmas without any solution. Therefore, at the present time, the scientists have no other choice but to accept the crude reality of the superior dimensions of nature and the cosmos. They may deny them, since they have the right to deny them. They might laugh, however, we have already stated many times, the one who laughs at what he does not know is an ignoramus who walks on the path of idiocy. So, as time passes, materialistic science will become exposed by new discoveries, and each day it will sink more and more in the pit of its own ignorance. Indeed, the theory of Pythecus Noah with his 3 bastard sons, namely the cyanocephalus with a tail, the monkey without a tail, and the arboreal man, are very good material for Molière and his caricatures. Indeed, in our blood we do not have anything of pithecoids. For us, the facts speak for themselves. Chapter 3. The hour has arrived for us to make a certain analysis in relation to the origin of the human being. But, indeed, in the name of the truth, we have to state that the merely materialistic anthropology knows nothing about the origin of the human being. Nevertheless, we Gnostics know the origin of the human being. In our former chapters, based on our Gnostic anthropology, we taught some basic knowledge related with its origin. Yet now we are going to delve a little more into this enigma. Let us think for a while about the Mesozoic era of our world, on the era of the reptiles, 66 to 252 million years ago. The human being indeed existed at that time. Of course, this is denied by materialistic anthropology. Indeed, the merely profane anthropology ignores the real origin of the human being. Materialistic anthropology wants us to believe that the human being did not exist before the Quaternary period, the most recent 2.6 million years. The possibility that the human being existed during the Cenozoic era, from today back 65 million years, is denied to him. In depth, this is manifestly absurd. Nonetheless, some facts make us think. We ask ourselves why certain species such as the plesiosaur and the pterodactyl survived for such a long period of time and then finally became extinct. Now, in this day and age, all we find from these species are fossil remains located in certain museums. Meanwhile, in spite of the disappearance of these species, in spite of the fact that they were extinguished from the face of the earth, the human being still continues to exist. Why did almost all of the species from the Mesozoic epoch become extinct? How is it that human beings were not extinct? So many species have disappeared, yet the human being continues to be alive. How can this be? What explanation could materialistic science give for this phenomenon? Logically, materialistic science cannot give us a single explanation. Obviously, if many contemporaneous species of the human being from the Quaternary and Tertiary periods disappeared, then, human beings should also have eclipsed from the face of the earth. The human species should have also disappeared. Yet, they continue to exist. Therefore, the fact that the human being did not disappear in the Quaternary and Tertiary periods allows us to infer that the human being existed long before the Quaternary period and even beyond the epoch of the reptiles, Mesozoic, or of the Carboniferous period, 299 to 359.2 million years ago. Moreover, we have the right to discuss the existence of human beings before the Mesozoic era, 66 to 252 million years ago. That right is granted onto us precisely due to the concrete fact that all of the species from the Tertiary and Quaternary periods have disappeared, and nonetheless their contemporaries, the human beings, still continue to exist. Gnostic anthropology, through superior systems, knows that the other species from the Tertiary and Quaternary periods vanished and that the intellectual animal mistakenly called human being did not disappear because the human being existed before the Mesozoic era and before the Carboniferous period. These facts are clear to us. Facts are facts, and before the facts we have to surrender. For example, there is a statement about flying serpents. This is terrifically true indeed, and the Bible corroborates it. The Bible cites the Leviathan in the book of Job. The Zohar emphatically affirms that the tempting serpent of Eden was a flying camel. It is not irrelevant to remember that in Germany when a species of flying camel was found, I refer to the fossil remnants that were perfectly organized by anthropologists. It is 78 feet long, a giant. Its long neck is similar to that of present-day camels, and it was provided with membranous wings. When the fossil remnants of this body of these are observed, then it is evident that indeed it is related to a flying serpent, similar to a camel because of its long neck. These fossil remnants might perhaps belong to the Leviathan. What could the anthropologist state in relation to this matter? Obviously, this saurus, or it's better if we say, pterosaur, is in depth only the remnants of what flying serpents were in the archaic times of our Earth. We will conclude by stating that the pterosaur has more in common with the ophidioid than with the lacertid. Delving further within all of this, we find many other pieces within the field of anthropology. In the Imperial Library of Peking there were paintings upon which some plesiosaurs and pterodactyls were shown. We ask ourselves, how is it possible that ancient people who did not know anything about paleontology or paleontography knew about extinct species from the epoch of the reptiles? If we did not know about the possibility of developing certain capacities and faculties of a transcendental type in the human brain, the former paragraphs would be inexplicable. Such faculties allow us to study the history of nature and of the human being, a history that lies hidden within the very depth of the memories of everything that is, has been, and shall be. Dear readers, for certain we must know that the present human species is not in any way made up of real human beings. It is true, no lie. Gnostic anthropologists are in agreement with profane anthropologists only on the issue of the origin of the intellectual animal. The intellectual animal comes from the Quaternary period or at the end of the Tertiary period. This is something that we cannot deny in any way. First of all, it is convenient to make a complete differentiation between a human being 2 and an intellectual animal. Point 3. The true human being existed before the Carboniferous period and before Mesozoic times. This true human being lived during the epoch of the reptiles. Unfortunately, some authentic human beings degenerated terribly at the end of the Tertiary period, during the Miocene. They absurdly mixed themselves with some beasts of nature, as we have already stated in previous chapters. Several gigantic simians were the outcome of that mixture. That species in turn mixed themselves with other subhuman beasts. Thus, the outcomes of all of this were the simians that we know, and the evolution of certain humanoids. During the Quaternary period, these humanoids continued reproducing themselves incessantly. Subsequently, they continued reproducing themselves incessantly, and they are the humanoids of this epoch in which we live. This present humanity is a mixture of authentic human beings with animals of nature. Now, we see the difference between the real human beings of the first, second, and third root races and the intellectual animals of the fourth and fifth root race in which we are presently. However, we must not be disappointed. The seed for the human being is still in our sexual glands. There is not a single person who does not carry these human sexual elements, since this is the outcome of the crossing of human beings with animals. Therefore, the possibility exists for present-day people to elevate themselves to a true human state, since they carry within their sexual glands those human seeds. Of course, we have to develop those human seeds. Indeed, in order to create the authentic human being within ourselves, we need to know the mysteries of sex. Unfortunately, materialistic anthropologists believe that they are human beings. They do not know anything about the mysteries of sex. They invent multiple theories about the origin of the human species that are in no way useful. I think that all of the speculations stated by the materialistic anthropologists are causing great psychological damage to people. It is lamentable that materialistic anthropology is corrupting this human race. It is already enormously degenerated, and with such fantasies this humanity continues to degenerate awfully every day. We Gnostic anthropologists have to severely judge the materialistic anthropologists who state that they only believe in what they see. Nonetheless, they believe in what they never have seen. They believe in absurd utopias, such as the one which states that we are the children of mice, or that the mandrill, the baboon, is the ancestor of those elegant ladies and gentlemen. We have to search for the origin of this fifth human race, which is this present root race to which we belong. We must find its cradle around Kashmir on the central plateau of Tibet, around the Euxinus, etc. I do not mean to say that the entire cradle of this present root race had its origin only in those cited regions. Yet, in the name of the truth, I have to state that those places of the earth constitute a very important origin for this human species. I am clearly referring to the people of this fifth root race. There have been 5 root races in the world. They correspond to 5 different epochs. We have already stated that the protoplasmic, polar, root race came first, afterwards the Hyperborean root race, thereafter the Lemurian root race, more recently, the Atlantean root race, and finally our Aryan root race. Throughout these chapters we will summarily develop the history of each root race, yet we will include a complete description of the scenarios upon which each root race was developed. Now I want to state that the human beings of the first root race existed at the northern polar cap on the sacred island. At that time, the northern polar cap, the 2 poles, were located on the equatorial zone. Unquestionably, the form of life of that root race was very different from that of our present one. Materialistic anthropology does not know anything about this whole matter. Moreover, our assertions will not in any way agree with the famous Pangaea or Great Primeval Continent. Therefore, when we state such declarations, we expose ourselves to only one thing: the mockery of profane anthropologists. Indeed, profane anthropologists do not totally know about celestial mechanics. They do not know there is a process of the revolutions of the axis of the earth. They think that the earth has always had the same position in relation to the sun. Thus, for this reason they have invented their Pangaea, since the theory of Pangaea is more comfortable for them than the study of astronomy. The Hyperboreans had their scenario on those horseshoe-shaped lands that go around the North Pole. Obviously, England itself and even Ireland were lands that belonged to the Hyperboreans. Alaska also belonged to that land, since all of those regions form a horseshoe around the northern polar cap, although some even of these parts have been under the waves and have come up again since then. Later on, Lemuria was in the area that now occupies the Pacific Ocean. It was an enormous continent that covered the whole area of the Pacific Ocean. Subsequently, Atlantis was in the ocean that bears its name. Therefore, the physiognomy of our terrestrial globe has changed many times. The world has had 5 aspects or scenarios upon which its 5 root races developed. However, we do not expect that the ladies and gentlemen of materialistic anthropology will accept all of this. Unquestionably, this will be something impossible since they believe that they know everything. Nevertheless, not only do they ignore these things, but worst of all, they ignore that they ignore. Materialistic anthropologists who are partisans of absurdity propose to attack the biblical Genesis. Thus, with their anti-clerical efforts, they have invented those speculations that are abundant here, there, and everywhere. They do not even want to understand what the word Eden signifies. Eden signifies voluptuousness, giving pleasure to the senses. Its etymology is explained from a Greek basis. Therefore, Eden signifies voluptuousness. Eden is sex itself. The whole biblical Genesis is a work of alchemy that literally has nothing to do with history. That Eden that in former times was situated in Mesopotamia between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers much later became the school for Chaldeans and Magus, the Elohim. That Eden seems to be related to the famous Adivarsha of ancient Lemurians and even to the Garden of Hesperides of the Atlantean continent. Eden is sex itself, yet this will never be accepted by the materialistic anthropologists. Moreover, they will never accept the great sexual mysteries of Chaldea, India, Babylon, Mexico, and Egypt. In Lemuria, the system of reproduction was by Kriya-Shakti. This was during the Mesozoic era. The Kriya-Shakti system existed long before the human race ever fell into animal generation, orgasm. We know very well that the Lemurian root race fell into degeneration in the third part of the Eocene, that is, during the Miocene epoch. Indeed, the true human beings of the Mesozoic epoch reproduced themselves by means of Kriya-Shakti. This word signifies willpower and intelligence. Lemurians were true human beings, and their system of reproduction would not be accepted in this day and age by the intellectual animals. This is because the system of reproduction of the true human beings, the Kriya-Shakti, is a sacred system that would cause laughter and rejection by the materialistic anthropologists. They would feel offended with such a system. In Lemurian times, sex was considered sacred. The sacred sperm was never ejaculated. For the sperm was considered a venerable matter. A spermatozoon escaped during intercourse without orgasm in order to fecundate the womb. Thus, the human race enjoyed wonderful powers, extrasensory faculties, that allowed them to know all of the marvels of the universe and the cosmos. This is why it is stated that they lived in a paradisiacal state. Nevertheless, when the human beings fell into animal generation, orgasm, that is to say, when they started to ejaculate the entity of semen, they then precipitated themselves into devolution. So, Lemurians sexually degenerated themselves in the third part of the Eocene epoch. These sexually degenerated Lemurians were fallen humans who sexually mixed themselves with beasts of nature. Thus, intellectual animals were born from this mixture. Definitively, the intellectual animal will never accept this system of reproduction by Kriya-Shakti precisely because of his animal condition. The system of Kriya-Shakti is not for intellectual animals, it is a system for human beings, since animals and humans are two different kingdoms. Indeed, this is why we would not be surprised if the intellectual animals from materialistic anthropology reject the system of reproduction by Kriya-Shakti. Nevertheless, in spite of everything, we have to state that the seeds of the human being are still within the endocrine glands of the intellectual animal. Therefore, it is obvious that if we work with the system of Kriya-Shakti, we can indeed regenerate the brain and develop within our physiologic, biologic, and psychosomatic nature the true human being, the authentic human. Yet, I restate, the intellectual animal does not like the Kriya-Shakti system. Gnosis has diffused the mysteries of sex in many places. It is true that universal Gnosticism has accepted the system of reproduction by Kriya-Shakti, however it is also true that millions of intellectual animals have rejected it. We cannot blame them since they are indeed intellectual animals who are the outcome of sexual intercourse of various Lemurian humans, who sexually degenerated themselves in the tertiary period, who mixed themselves with beasts of nature. How could the outcome of humans and beasts accept a sexual system that does not belong to them? It is impossible. Thus, it is good that we reflect upon this. Now let us consider another more important theme in order for us to reflect upon it in more depth. Let us see, from where did all the living species emerge? From where did this nature emerge? Why do we have to accept all of the materialistic utopias? Why do we have to accept the dogma of evolution? Why should we live within the world of hypotheses? The moment has arrived to delve a little further into this subject matter. In my second chapter, one stated that the human species had developed in other dimensions. I also asserted that the materialistic ladies and gentlemen do not accept these superior dimensions. They want, by their own whim, to place us within Euclid's tridimensional dogma. They are like the pigs that always want to remain in the pigsty and do not want to see anything that does not resemble it. Yet, we do not accept dogmas. To begin, they have no proof regarding all of their beliefs. What they have affirmed, for instance, is that they believe that the human being comes from the ape. Darwin never ever stated that the human being came from the ape. Indeed, Darwin only affirmed that the human being and the ape have a common ancestor. Therefore, Darwin only opened a door, that is all. Charles Robert Darwin always felt nonconformity with the biblical narrative of creation because in the book of Genesis God appears as an executioner for the non-believers. Nonetheless, Darwin rejected Karl Marx's offer. Karl Marx offered Darwin the dedication of his book, Das Kapital, First English edition. Darwin rejected Karl Marx's offer because he did not want to have his name associated with attacks against religion. Even while in states of extreme doubt, Darwin remained with a speck of faith in divinity. In the complete sense of the word, Darwin was never an atheist because he never denied the existence of a God. He stated in his autobiography that he always felt horror to all of that which can cause suffering. He never agreed with the suffering inflicted upon a slave by his ruler or the suffering inflicted upon an animal by any man. For him, such horror was one of the reasons to abandon religion. Darwin was not a materialist, he was an investigator. He opened a door, that is all. We have to take advantage of that door and delve into the mystery, since until now everything has been hypotheses, as when Haeckel stated, and who indeed emphatically asseverated, that neither geology nor phylogeny would ever be exact sciences. If theories that are invented one day disappear the next day, if those ladies and gentlemen are affirming what they have never seen, if they are lying in such a way, then we must not and cannot give them any credit. Therefore, we must appeal to what Gnosticism teaches, which is to appeal to the wisdom of the ancient sages. The fact that the human race developed within other dimensions is something impossible for materialistic science to accept, yet for the Gnostics it is a reality. The reason ancient sages could tell us about plesiosaurs and reveal to us the different beasts that existed during the epoch of primitive reptiles and periods even beyond that, such as the Carboniferous period, without ever having studied paleontology and paleontography, without having such jargon within their heads, is because they possessed extraordinary faculties that can be developed. These are dormant within the human brain. Can materialistic anthropologists affirm that they totally know the human brain already? Obviously, they cannot. Moreover, I affirm that medical science still does not know the human body. They might believe that they know it, but they do not. Conclusion: what is the origin of this humanity on planet Earth? What is the origin of all of the races of nature, of all which has been, is, and shall be? This is the theme upon which we need to reflect in this chapter. What do the ancient Nawas tell us about the Omiokan? What is the Omiokan? It is stated that within the Omiokan there is only wind and darkness. This is how the Nawas affirm it. The Omiokan is also named Yoali Ehekatl because of the wind and darkness. This invites us to reflect. What would the erudites from Mexico and those in the Eastern world, in Asia, tell us about the Omiokan? I once stated what matter is, in itself. I said that any form of matter can be destroyed, yet the substance, or seed, of the matter continues in other dimensions. Thus, the earth substance or the earth seed is deposited in the profound space of the universe, within the unknowable zero dimension. I also affirmed that such an earth substance was the Iliaster. Eventually, the earth would remain deposited as a seed within the profundity of the infinite space, awaiting a new cosmic manifestation. Let us remember that when a tree dies, its seeds remain. Within each seed there is the possibility of the development of a new tree. Likewise, when a planet dies, then its seed or its homogeneous, insipid, insubstantial, colorless, odorless matter remains deposited within the bosom of the eternal mother space. Such a seed in relation with the one is two. We must not forget that in order to be one, there is the necessity of being two. The one feels itself to be two. Thus, the primeval chaotic earth, that seed world deposited in mother space, is the Omiokan. It is a true paradise that during the time of inactivity vibrates with happiness. The Omiokan is also named Yoali Ehekatl due to the wind and darkness and because Ehekatl is the god of cosmic movement, the god of wind. Yoali Ehekatl, the great cosmic movement of the Omiokan, is the place where the authentic happiness of the world reigns, profound inexhaustible joy. There are cosmic days and cosmic nights. When the earth is in a germinal state, when any given planet is found deposited in a germinal state within the bosom of profound space, it slumbers, yet while being two, they are found to be one. After a certain period of activity, the electrical impulse, the electrical hurricane, makes all of the positive and negative aspects enter into activity. This is why it is stated that within the Omiokan there is wind and darkness. We do not want to state darkness in the complete sense of the word. This is only an allegorical way of speaking. Let us remember in the Egyptian mysteries when the priests would approach the neophytes. They would whisper in their ears, "Osiris is a dark god." Yet, Osiris was not dark. The fact of the matter is that the light of the pure spirit, the light of the great reality, is darkness to the intellect. This is why it is stated that within the Omiokan there is only darkness and wind, that is to say, cosmic movement. This is where the uncreated light emerges from and where the universal movement represented by Ehekatl is developed. Before the manifestation of the solar logos, that is, the multiple perfect unity, the infinite quietude whirls about within the Omiokan. In the sacred land of Anahuac, the solar logos was always named Quetzalcoatl. Indubitably, Quetzalcoatl as logos exists long before any cosmic manifestation. The Omiokan is the navel of the universe that intensely vibrates and palpitates within reciprocal whirls, where the infinitely large bursts into the infinitely small, where the large encounters the small, where the macrocosm encounters the microcosm. With the dawn of any universe, the electrical hurricane makes all of the atoms palpitate in the form of whirls within the Omiokan, within the navel of the universe, within the cosmic womb, while being two. In the Omiokan, the Tlok Nawak is the nocturnal tempest of all possibilities. Because when the electric movement, the electric hurricane, the electric whirl, makes all of those atoms spin within the chaotic matter, all the possibilities of universal life persist. This is how the best authors of cosmogenesis have described it. The Omiokan is the lord of the night, the black Tezcatlipoca who, when denying himself, bursts into light and the universe is born that fecundates, that drives Quetzalcoatl, the solar logos. Tezcatlipoca in its feminine aspect represents the moon and God Mother who is precisely the womb of the world. This is why it is stated that Tezcatlipoca bursts into light, the mother, which is a matter of fact, was fecundated by the logos, swells like a lotus flower and thus finally this universe is born. It is stated in Nahuatl that Quetzalcoatl then directs and drives the universe that emerged into existence. The logos, the multiple perfect unity, is radical. Yet, he turns himself asunder into the 49 fires in order to work with this rising universe. Unquestionably, the one who directs the universe is precisely the logos, Quetzalcoatl. It is the cosmic consciousness governing, directing that which is, has been, and shall be. I am perfectly sure that conventional anthropology would not accept this conception of Quetzalcoatl. We do not ignore that materialistic anthropology rejects the logos and that it is against the sacred Anahuac tradition, that it does not want anything to do with the wisdom of the sacred land of Anahuac. When rejecting Quetzalcoatl as the true monarch of the universe, materialistic anthropology actually declares itself against the wisdom of the sacred land of Anahuac. Thus, my dear friends, it is worthwhile that we reflect upon this. Nevertheless, it is not convenient that we Gnostics have an anthropomorphic conception of our Lord Quetzalcoatl either, no. Therefore, I repeat, Quetzalcoatl is a perfect multiple unity, it is the Greek demiurge, the Platonic logos. Quetzalcoatl is the prodigious principle of nature that makes every atom vibrate, that makes every sun shake, it is the creative fire of the first instant. Never could the partisans of materialistic anthropology asseverate that they know the fire. They do not know it, much less the electricity. We are interested in the fire of the fire and in the profound knowledge of electricity. They pass judgment on the fire and they consider that it is an element of combustion, yet they are mistaken. Indeed, they might state, if we strike a match, we will see that fire emerges, so this is the outcome of combustion. Yet, it is not so. Rather, combustion is the outcome of fire, because the hand that strikes the match has its own fire, energy, in order to move, and within the match itself there is latent fire. By means of striking the matchbox, we remove the particles within which the chemical matter of that match is trapped, so that the fire can emerge. The fire exists before striking the match, this is unknown in chemistry. The fire in itself is the logos, the fundamental intelligent principle of nature. Let it be clear that we are not defending that anthropomorphic God who upsets the materialists so very much, no. We are only making a great emphasis here in order to state that nature has intelligent principles and that the sum of all of them is Quetzalcoatl, the Greek demiurge, the Platonic logos, the multiple perfect unity that is latent in every atom, within every corpuscle that comes into life and within every creature that exists under the sun. There is no doubt, my dear friends, that monotheism caused a great deal of harm to humanity, because materialism, atheism, was the outcome of it, the consequence of it. In addition, when polytheism was taken to its extremes, it caused a great deal of harm because from it emerged monotheism, and likewise from monotheism emerged materialistic atheism. Thus, with polytheism degenerated, it gave origin to anthropomorphic monotheism, and due to the abuses carried out by the diverse religious clergies, this as a result brought materialism. If we accept the intelligent principles within the depths of nature and within the cosmos as the foundation of the whole machinery of relativity, then we will not ignore that variety is unity. I understand that in the not-so-distant future, humanity must return to polytheism, yet in a transcendental monistic way. This must be equilibrated from the spiritual point of view, meaning from the spiritual monotheistic and polytheistic points of view. Only in this manner, indeed, can a renovation of principles and a complete revolution of the consciousness be initiated.